Damon Martin, MMA Fighting, here with the champ himself. He is one of the top UFC commentators in the world, but this last weekend, he was actually calling wrestling, which, gotta say, he killed it. Absolutely killed it. I'm always happy to speak to Daniel Cormier. DC, what is going on?
Nothing much, man. Just getting back from my little kids' practice. I've got my academy now in town, and it's doing absolutely fantastic, and I'm pumped about it.
I know you, of course, you love and you live and breathe wrestling, but how is it doing that? Like having your own academy now, like it's kind of like a dream come true, right?
Everything surrounding wrestling is insane to me because, it's a sport that has really given me everything, from my education to my ability to work hard, my mentality. It's all is formed inside of a wrestling room. So I'm trying to give those lessons back to the next generation, so it's a beautiful sport, man. It's hard, but it's like in the things that are hard, you become like so much better and you just accomplish things that you never thought possible.
Yeah. So I mentioned, of course, this past weekend, you got to call the NCAA Championships on ESPN. Of course, you've been with ESPN for a little while now. How excited were you just to get that call to do this commentary thing? Because like when you sent me the message about it, dude, I got so excited for you.
Yeah, it was the time of my life. I had the time of my life. I haven't been to an NCAA tournament since like 2011 because I've just been a little busy, I was a little busy over the course of the last decade, but I would always watch. Every month around my birthday, my wife just let me kind of do my own thing because she knew for 3 days in March, it was NCAA wrestling and it was what I did, so I was always watching, but then to be able to call the matches and be there live, and it was amazing, man. I got there on Thursday night and I went to the arena to watch a little bit and do like an on-camera interview talking about the next day. And one of my athletes that graduated Gilroy High School was about to wrestle. And I saw him, and like Dave and I swear, like tears welled up in my eyes because it's a dream come true for a coach to see his athletes compete on the largest stage. And for Chase Saldate to be wrestling in the NCAA tournament was awesome. And for me to be there to watch it was fantastic. This was one of the best. I was buzzing. Like when I was done Friday night after the semifinals, I was like buzzing. Like my body like wouldn't shut off. I was like laying in bed for hours, just smiling and thinking about what I had just done. And then Saturday, the exact same thing.
I feel like they're going to bring you back, DC. Like, I think this is going to be an annual thing for you now because you killed it on the broadcast. And I watch every year. I only went 1 year. I went the year it was in Cleveland. So I've only been to one. But the atmosphere is so electric at those things, and I always watch them, and they do a great job. Everyone that does Anthony Robles, everyone that does the coverage throughout ESPN does a phenomenal job. But man, you really killed it on that broadcast. Like it was just so good to hear you doing the commentary, and you really brought an enthusiasm and an energy that I think it was just like brought it to a new level.
I think what happens is you take a guy from one of the main sports and you put him in his natural element, right? You still take that same feel. Right? Like when I was getting ready for the heavyweight fight or the heavyweight match, I said fight a few times over the course of the weekend, but when I was getting ready for the heavyweight match and they showed the walkouts, I was like, man, it felt like a title fight to me. It really did. And I just tried to call it as that. And I felt like people enjoyed it. People enjoyed seeing a guy listen, I'm knowledgeable about wrestling. I'm knowledgeable about fighting, but ultimately at the core, I'm just a fan of it. Like I'm a professional fan. Rogan coined that term, and it's probably the truest thing ever. Dude, we're professional fans. Like we just got the coolest seat in the house, and we do the coolest job. Like it's the best. Like I'm so lucky, man, to have the jobs that I have.
Absolutely. Well, let me start right there with the heavyweights because, of course, the biggest story coming out of the NCAA is beyond Penn State winning a freaking another title. I mean, 5 titles, the 5 champions in the industry. We'll come back to that in a second. But Gable Steveson was the story of the week, and everyone knew going in it was going to be, his tournament, and he had talked about being his final tournament. Of course, he left his shoes on the mat. I was actually at your retirement match, if you remember that correctly, when you left your shoes on the mat. But he left his shoes on the mat and officially walked away. 21 years old, so young. And I know you said during the broadcast, you're like, you're kind of conflicted. You're kind of sad to see him go so soon. I know you talked to Gable before the match. Did you get a chance to talk to him after? And even I root for Gable. Like, I was hoping he would win. And listen, I hope he has a phenomenal career in WWE, whatever he does next. But of course, 21 years old, I'm thinking, man, Olympics 3 years away. He could easily
especially
make
now
another
with the
run.
money. There's actually money in wrestling. You know, like, he's the type of kid with the NIL deals and everything that could truly just cash out without much challenge. Like, he could legitimately wrestle this tournament another year, maybe. I don't know how many years he has left eligibility, but he could wrestle the same tournament next year, same results, and make a ton of money. Because now with the NIL deals, he's so marketable that he could still cash in. But the reality is, it seems as though he's made his mind up to go on to bigger and better things. And I believe that it's going to be fantastic. I think that the kid's he's an entertainer. I think he gets it. You saw it before he did the backflip, right? Everybody knows what they wanted. But instead he's like doing this to him and he's like posturing. Like, the kid knows how to entertain. But the reality is this, and this is the only thing that I caution when you walk away from something that you can control, right? Because he can control being the best in the world in wrestling and the best in national tournament. He's got to be booked right in WWE. And I know those guys do a fantastic job and they'll take care of him. But there are more Shelton Benjamins, Chad Gable. I can't remember. I'm forgetting his real name. There's more of those guys than there are Kurt Angles, right? There's just more wrestlers that were high-level guys that went over and weren't booked in the best way than there are the guys that just kind of clicked like Kurt. So I hope Gable falls into the Kurt category and gets booked the right way and has a long career making a ton of money, and because he seems to fit the bill. I mean, Kane, you know, there's been a lot of guys that have gone over and haven't had the most success.
You know Gable. I've interviewed him a couple times. Incredibly charismatic guy. You know, funny, outgoing. Of course, I mean, athleticism beyond anything you could imagine. 6'1", 265 pounds, doing freaking backflips. So we know he's got the athleticism. But if you're gonna, and WWE, that's another thing you know very well. You know pro wrestling. You've been a pro wrestling fan your entire life. So when you look at the scale, let's say Brock Lesnar being kind of like the top, the guy who's accomplished the most in WWE, being a really high level collegiate wrestler, down to, and I'm not digging on the guy. I'm just saying, like, a guy like, let's say Dan Severn, who tried briefly in WWE, did not. Like, where do you think Gable? Like, just again, you have to be booked right. We all know this, but in terms of your opinion, how far he can go, where do you see Gable in terms of what he could do in pro wrestling?
I think with Gable's personality and his abilities, I think he can go to the absolute top. Look, man, I don't know if you can ever replicate what Brock has done, or even Roman Reigns. Like, the way Roman Reigns has been booked over the course of his career is he's been a monster, like, since day one, right? Like, you don't generally get those guys. Even a guy like Drew McIntyre, who's physically gifted, you could tell they love him. He still doesn't get booked like Brock and Roman. Like, so I believe that he can go to the top though. But like, it's just a matter of, like, again, it's like the creative department is going to get together and they're going to say, hey, what do we do with this kid? And a lot of it's going to be based on reception also. Like, the crowd dictates where you go in WWE. We both know that. And I just hope that he is over with the crowd right away, or completely on the opposite side and booed like Kurt was, and then they kind of play off of that.
Yeah. What do you think the other side would have been if Gable would have gone into fighting? And I asked Logan Storley this question. Of course, Logan's his teammate, knows him very well from Minnesota. Of course, Logan's over in Bellator. And I asked Logan, of course, he said the same thing I think we're all saying. Good for him, go get your money, go do your thing. I'm happy for you, proud for you, all those kind of things. But I said, what kind of an athlete do you think you would have been? And he kind of had that, like, whew, man, like, that's just, you don't see heavyweights with that kind of
world champion.
No doubt.
World champion. Gable Steveson in fighting would be a world champion. Now, here's the thing, right? When you look at Brock leaving college and going into the WWE, making the WWE name and then coming back to fighting, fantastic. Gable's more equipped to fight first than WWE. Now, I think, like I said, I think he'll do fine there, but I think that he's more equipped to go and do the professional fighting side of the equation and then take that over to WWE. opposed to WWE first and UFC. But we'll see. We'll see.
You know, we had this conversation. This is going back like 6 years ago. Because I remember we did kind of a preview for the 2016 Olympics back in the day. And at that point, and I know you remember this, I talked to you about Kyle Snyder. Kyle Snyder's like, I'm going to fight. He won his gold medal. I'm going to fight. And I remember the conversation we had, and I bring this up all the time. I brought it up to Kyle when I talked to him 2 weeks ago before he had the super match with Jaden Cox. I said, at the time you told me, you said, listen, I love these guys coming in MMA, but at the same time, we need these guys in wrestling. We need them to propel American wrestling. We're now seeing guys staying in wrestling because money's there finally. Kyle, I don't know what Kyle's making, but he's like, I'm living comfortably. Like he's not doing MMA. He's not doing it. He's going to stick with wrestling, wants to make another run at the 2024 Olympics. Of course, he's a 2-time medalist. Now, Jordan Burroughs, a guy we've both talked about many times. At one point, I'm going to fight. I'm going to do it. Now he's making money doing wrestling. Like, it's kind of weird. We've almost kind of gone to the other side now where guys are actually making money wrestling. They don't have to fight if they don't want to.
It's better for USA Wrestling, you know. And as wrestlers at heart, it's good to see that these guys are finally getting compensated for what is the hardest sport in the world. There is no sport like wrestling. Like, and I've done them both. There's nothing like the grind of becoming a world champion or a world level wrestler. Like, there's just nothing like it. And I'm glad that those guys are getting paid finally to be able to stay within the sport. But we're talking about the cream of the crop. These guys are Jordan Burroughs, Kyle Dake, and Kyle Snyder, and Jaden Cox, and Gable Steveson. These are the cream of the crop. The reality is, like, for those guys to make enough money to stay wrestling is fantastic. But the thing is, for all those guys, there's only one baddest man on the planet, and that's Gable. And when the baddest man on the planet is 21, the WWE opens their wallet. They say, hey, we want you.
Yeah, we know Vince likes the big boys. You know what I mean? He ain't opening his wallet for Nick Soriano. Nick Soriano's a great athlete, but he ain't paying Nick Soriano Gable Steveson money. You know what I mean?
No.
I mentioned
over there too, though. Jacob Casper. You know, he's the Creed brothers. Jacob, he's killing it. My boy's killing it over there.
Yeah. I mentioned at the top there about Penn State winning another title. You know how much I celebrated. I think I texted you when it happened. Like when Ohio State won their team title, I was freaking out beyond any excitement because I just doesn't see it happening. But Penn State, at this point, like we all know Cale Sanders is an incredible coach, but my God, it almost feels unfair at this point. Like 5 national champions again this year, another team title. Like, dude, I talked to Bo Nickel. I've talked to I've talked to David Taylor. I've talked to a lot of the Penn State wrestlers, and I'm just like, I'm an Ohio State guy, but even I have to kind of bow down and be like, good Lord, man, it's hard to describe the dominance Penn State has right now.
It's absurd, right? Cale's already the 3rd most winning coach in terms of national titles in NCAA history. He's only been there for like 11 years, 12 years. Like, he hasn't been there long. So the dominance that these young men have put on display has been second to none. Like, honestly, their preparation, their composure, their ability to execute is like nothing we've ever seen before. Because it's not even just about going out there and putting a great tournament on the mat. It's consistent, right? You know, these guys have won 9 straight final matches. 9 straight final matches. I mean, that never happens. And the reality is they're all still young. The only ones leaving, Nick Lee. They all have the option to come back. And I was so impressed with the way that they put everything together, man. From Roman Bravo Young knocking off Dayton Fix again in the way that he did to Nick Lee giving up that first takedown and then, beating Kevon, I think his name was Clark from North Carolina, to Carter Starachi winning in a champ versus champ match against Makai Lewis, to the way that Aaron Brooks put a ride on Miles Amin, like I'd never seen. He just lost to him in the Big Ten Finals. Like, he lost him in the Big Ten Finals.
And that's a bronze medalist, by the way. That's an Olympic bronze medalist.
Yeah. The way that he rode him, bro, and controlled him was insane. And then to watch Dean, not Gabe, it's
Max
Dean finally get a title was fantastic, because he had struggled with the Iowa kid in the dual meet, right? The Iowa kid had to make a mistake for him to win. But it's like getting prepared in December or wrestling these guys in December to March, the way that they are peaking, the way that they are making they're doing their phases is tremendous. And it showed once again, like they've got Coach Calvita out there. Kale's obviously a great winner. I think that his brother, Cody, and Casey Cunningham, they deserve a lot of credit in the preparation of these kids, because even today at 42, 43, Kale's still on the mat a lot. So these guys are putting together practice plans. He has complete faith in his coaching staff, and he trusts these guys to make sure that his guys are prepared, as he does too. So, man, it really is a pleasure to watch, and I believe that Penn State is going to be a problem for a real long time.
Yeah, as long as Kale's there, and they're paying him too. I know he did a contract a couple of years ago, and he's getting paid well too, which is good to see. I don't think, unless he just decides one day I don't want to be here anymore, I think he's just going to be one of those guys. He's stay
there forever. He's John Smith at Oklahoma State. He's Tom Brands at Iowa.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's so crazy. I know the answer to this, DC, because you got your boys out in Gilroy, you got your club out there, and of course you got your gig with the UFC you're doing. You're never going to move over to college wrestling, though, are you? You're never going to coach?
No,
never.
No.
Come on, DC. You'd be an incredible college coach.
You know what the crazy thing is, Damon? Is like, if I went to coach college wrestling, I'd be divorced. My wife, I give so much time to wrestling already. And college wrestling just takes 5 times more effort to do. You got to give these guys, there are very few guys at the top. Kale, Tom, Zeke Jones, John Smith, Michigan, those guys, Iowa State, those guys are making money. But the vast majority of these coaches are not making life-changing money. So they're doing this for the love of a sport that has given them so much. And I think that it's embedded in us to want to give back to the sport of wrestling. But no, I couldn't coach college wrestling, man. I love the freedom of coaching in high school, and also with the jobs that I have. I do wrestling for love. I do everything else for financial security.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. I mentioned, of course, we're seeing, of course, there's still a lot of great wrestlers coming into mixed martial arts. I mentioned a name there, Bo Nichols, a guy who just made a run at the Olympics. He didn't quite make it. Now he's making his run. Do you still see guys like that? Because again, we've seen some mixed results. I mean, a guy like Ed Ruth, incredible college athlete. He's had some mixed results in MMA. There's no guarantee. Yeah. But then you look at a guy like, we didn't see him necessarily as like a, Olympian, but look what Islam Makhachev is doing. I mean, in my opinion, so I love Charles Oliveira. Let me be clear. I love Charles Oliveira. Islam Makhachev's the best lightweight in the world right now. I think Islam's the best lightweight in the sport right now. Like, it's so funny. You can't always predict, though, how wrestlers are going to transition. We wish we could, but we can't.
Let me tell you something. This Islam Makhachev's crazy. He told me, I tell him, I'm like, hey, my guy took you down to practice. He goes, brother, bring Jordan Burroughs. Like, this will be a good match. Like, he's so sure of his wrestling. Like, I love Islam, man. He's the best wrestler. He's the best fighter in the world at that weight class. And his abilities are just second to none. But you don't know. Like you said, you just don't know. You don't know what these guys turn into. So when we had that run where it was myself and Cejudo and the way Askren dominated with his wrestling, it was almost like an outlier because it doesn't always work out that way. Kamaru Usman now has been dominant using both of his skills. Derek Brunson, a guy that did not have the background, did not have all the accolades, has done really well for himself with a wrestling-based style. So you just don't know. You just don't know. So you can have this shiny diamond of an athlete, and it just never works. But we've got some guys. I've got some guys. I think that we got guys at Zinkin Entertainment that we feel can transition. So we don't stuff the cupboards with a whole bunch of wrestlers. You take the best wrestlers that fit for mixed martial arts. That's why you see a Kyle Crutchmer, who's lost only one time, a very questionable decision in Bellator. And Nick Piccinini, Jacoby Smith, who just signed with Khabib and them at Eagle FC. And the latest one we just signed was Austin O'Connor, who went to the NCAA tournament as a returning national champion with a torn ACL and still got onto the medal stand. And in that moment, Austin placing with a torn ACL told me this guy will be okay. He's got the grit and determination to be a fighter. So me, Dwayne, and Bob, we've done a really good job of trying to identify the ones that it'll work with, opposed to just overloading yourself. And Dwayne and Bob have done this for 25 years, right? You got John Fitch and Josh Koscheck and Kane and myself and Luke Rockhold, even though he was just a high school wrestler. We have they have done a really good job of finding the guys that fit the mold of becoming world champion. And that's why you've seen so many guys come out of AKA, wrestling-based guys that have made it to the top of the sport.
But what are they putting in the water in Dagestan? Because good Lord, man, Khabib, Islam, and you know what? I don't think he'll ever fight, because I'm sure from what I hear, he's a king in Dagestan. I talked to a guy who went to Dagestan to do a story, and he said there's two guys over there. They're like kings over there. It's Khabib and it's Sajalayev, Abdulrashid Sajalayev. They're like kings of Dagestan. So I don't think Sajalayev will ever do MMA. But boy, I tell you what, that guy, you know I'm a Kyle Snyder guy, but my God, man, Sajalayev is a monster.
He's a monster. He's a monster, man. And to beat Snyder as many times as he has, it's unreal. Like the guy is. But you know, this is new to the world, but it's not new to us, the guys that have done international wrestling, the guys that have been around the world championships. And I mean, when I got my third place medal at the Worlds, Russia had maybe 5 world champs or 6, and they had a third. And most of those guys were from Dagestan. You know, so it's like they just know how to wrestle. And I knew the moment I saw Khabib, and then I saw Islam, and I was like, the Dagestanis are starting to do mixed martial arts. It's a problem for the world. And that's absolutely what has happened.
Last thing I want to ask you about before I get you out of here. I know, of course, you're going to be coming up on the broadcast for UFC 273 in a matter of weeks. And the name that's on the tip of everyone's tongues. Listen, I have nothing but the utmost respect for Alexander Volkanovski. Peter Yan, Aljamain Sterling, going to be an incredible fight. But the guy everyone's talking about, of course, is Khamzat Chimaev. And, of course, he comes from that wrestling background from Chechnya. We all know, trains out at All Stars. Did you see the odds that came out on the fight? He's a minus 425 favorite over Gilbert Burns.
Against Gilbert Burns?
Against Gilbert Burns, he's a minus. Now, I said today on Twitter, I think he's an incredible prospect, incredible talent, monster. But man, it just seems like are people just? I mean, Gilbert Burns is a monster himself. He's a freaking former title contender, and the only guy that's beaten him in the last 4 years is Kamaru Usman. But I don't know. DC. I know you've raved about Khamzat. Mm-hmm. Is this the guy? Is this the guy who's good? You identified Islam, saying he's going to be the guy at lightweight. Is Khamzat going to be the guy at welterweight? Is he going to be the guy to dethrone Kamaru Usman?
I think he's the scariest contender we have seen for a while. And look, the odds may seem high, but when you look at the odds, you ask yourself, do you believe he wins? Maybe he doesn't dominate, maybe, but at the end of it, do you think he wins the fight against Gilbert Burns? And when you're asking yourself that and you say, yeah, I think so, it doesn't matter if the odds are minus 100, if it's even, it's still just saying that they believe he's going to win. And because they believe he's going to win, and they think he's going to win impressively, they make it to where you have to risk so much in order to make anything on him. But if you think he's going to win that fight, which a lot of people do, then the odds don't really matter. But I do believe he's the most scary contender we've had for a while, because there are just so many unknowns. Like, when I was a kid and I would watch The Undertaking, he's from Parts Unknown or Death Valley. Mankind was from Parts Unknown. I'm like, where's this dude from? Even though I knew he was Cactus Jack. I knew he was Cactus Jack. I knew underneath it all it was Cactus Jack. But it was like, what is this? Like, it's like Khamzat. There's just so many questions. And every time he comes in, he dominates, he's gone. Now, I love the whole buddy thing with Darren Till. I think it's a mistake. I think he should continue to be a mystery to people. I think he should spend as little time in front of the public and showing who he is, pulling the curtain back. I would pull the curtain back as little as I could if I'm Khamzat, just because the mystery is good for him. But yes, he's very scary. To say anyone will knock off Kamaru Usman is a lot, but if there's a guy that's going to see that seems to be a challenge, it seems to be this guy. And also, Gilbert, it's about the memory. The memory is we've seen Gilbert lose. Even though it's to the champ, we've seen him lose. We have not seen Khamzat struggle in any way, shape, or form over the entirety of his UFC career. So that is probably why you get the world thinking that he's that much of a favorite.
Yeah, well, and listen, I mean, you will not find a bigger Kamaru Usman fan on the planet than me. I think he's, I love George St. Pierre, but I personally think Usman's in terms of talent, I think Usman's the best welterweight ever. That being said, and I love Leon Edwards. Let me be clear. Leon Edwards has earned his title shot. He deserves it. All those kind of things. I don't like his chances to beat Kamaru Usman. I just don't see him winning that fight. In a way, I think Kamaru Usman needs Khamzat Chimaev because he really had, everyone, I know Colby. Listen, Colby's pushed him. We understand that. I nothing against Colby, but we saw it. Broke his jaw the first time, won the second time. Colby's kind of out of the picture for a little while now. He needs Khamzat in a way, right? Like Usman needs that guy that people are thinking, oh man, this is the guy. Because right now he doesn't have that. No, I don't think there's going to be that many people picking Leon Edwards to beat Kamaru Usman. But I bet you there will be people picking Khamzat to beat him.
I can only imagine what the odds would look like if it was Chimaev Usman, because those odds sound. I would love to see what the odds were when Usman and Burns opened up, because I can't imagine it was as high as this is. So I think that speaks to the dominance that Chimaev has put on paper to this point. Big shoes, man. It's a lot of hype to live up to. The dude seems to have the goods, and as the fights get tougher, we'll see. But I mean, what he did to Li Jingliang was ridiculous. And then I go into the interview, I go, hey, ladies and gentlemen, with Khamzat Chimaev, and he goes, brother, of course you are. Like, what was the option? Like, it was gonna be me. It was never gonna be Lee. And it's tremendous. He's got the swagger, he's got the fighting ability. I'm a fan. I'm a massive fan of Khamzat.
I would love to sit in that fighter meeting when you guys get to do the interview with those guys before the fight, man. I would love to see that conversation because he just seems like, I don't know, you're right. Like, I've tried to interview him. He doesn't do interviews very much. He doesn't really go, he doesn't do that kind of stuff. He's just, I'm going to go out and smash everybody. And I'm just like, all right, I get it.
I think the mystery is great, though. Stay away from the public eye. I think I'm going to make a YouTube video about this.
I like it. DC, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. Of course, killed it again on the broadcast, man. I loved watching. I watch every year, but I was so excited to hear you on the broadcast, man. I was geeking out the entire time, and I wasn't even there. But congratulations on that gig, man. Hopefully, we get to see you do it again next year. Look forward to your coming up broadcast, and thank you as always for taking the time. I appreciate it.
You're the man, Damon. Thank you.
Talk to you soon, DC.
Bye-bye.